good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
You're obsessed with her, and you're obsessed with her daughter!
All right, easy, Geraldo.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking mannequin busts. We're talking groan-worthy Dr. Sartain. And we're talking Judy fucking Greer. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking a Bánh Mi sandwich.
Oh my god. There's like 2 points of contention in this film. One is one that I said, and one is one that you've said.
But there's another one too, and it's little baby Julian, but we'll get to him.
Oh, people don't like... Okay, sorry, we'll get
not. I know. Well, trust me, I've got things to defend and I've got things to critique. But y'all, we are discussing David Gordon Green's Halloween 2018 / Halloween 2 / Halloween H4O 40 years later.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, we're talking about the Halloween franchise, so it's like, which of the many split timelines are we talking about? And in this case, it's almost a least complicated one, right?
It is, although, once Halloween Kills comes out this weekend, by the way, and of course Halloween Ends hopefully comes out next October if they start filming it in January as planned. I don't know.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, hopefully it keeps it as simple and pretty as the original film is.
There we go. Yeah.
Because that actually is a critique I have about this film, is that it's not... There's too much happening in this movie.
It is a lot, indeed. Yeah.
But Joe, we each have our own thoughts about this movie, this franchise, and I do think that we need probably someone else to come and help us through this walkthrough of this film that, made a ton of money. Let's not mince words here. It's a blockbuster for horror. All right, everyone. Well, he is a contributor for The Hollywood Reporter and has been featured in such publications as The New York Times, Fangoria, and Inverse. He is also the author of the book We Make Monsters Here, which is a collection of short horror stories. Please welcome Richard Newby.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
All right. I'm wearing a Michael Myers mask. No, that's dumb. I'm sorry. No, ignore that. I'm good.
I'm wearing a Laurie Strode mask.
A Laurie Strode wig.
Oh boy. Yeah, there are some wig choices in this movie as well.
Welcome, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me.
Happy to have you. And love to know. So what made you want to come on and discuss this film?
I love the Halloween franchise. I've been a fan of it for a long while. I'll admit, it was Rob Zombie's Halloween movie that really piqued my interest in the franchise. I've always been a lover of horror, but growing up, I was more so into the monster movies, the Universal stuff.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
Alien, the Blob remake from the 80s. So I actually didn't grow up watching a lot of slasher movies until I was in high school. And so high school was about the time when Rob Zombie's Halloween came out. And I thought that it looked amazing. So then I had watched John Carpenter's, which was on AMC one night.
Oh, they all were. All of them were on AMC.
Yeah, and I fell in love with it. I just thought it was such an interesting, I think, exploration of evil. I love Jamie Lee Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
Laurie is my favorite final girl. So yeah, I've watched every entry in the franchise multiple times. So I could not have been more hyped when I found out that David Gordon Green was tackling this new iteration.
Yeah, that's something too that I think, even his mere involvement is a point of contention within some fans. And I'm not going to lie, it makes me a little angry when I'm like, people are like, oh, he's a comedy guy, like, don't do this. And I'm like, no, don't do that.
Well, it's just another form of gatekeeping, right? Like, oh, we need to keep every genre siloed. So if you've ever worked in one, you can't possibly work in another. And I feel like I mean, whether you like this movie, whether you hate this movie, whether you're ambivalent, it's not up for us to decide who gets to work on what kinds of projects. Like, we can critique how it turns out and maybe talk about people that we would have liked to have seen handle things, but we also don't get to say, oh, certain person never gets to work on a horror film. Like, that's shit.
But you're absolutely right. And I do think the issue is here, like, if it was just any, like, random or maybe an original horror film, I don't think people would bat an eye. But because you're resurrecting a dead franchise after X amount of years. But here's the thing, and, you know, we can quibble about with this film, whatever, but, like, Danny McBride and David Gordon Green are passionate about this franchise.
That is true.
Jason Blum didn't just walk up to them and say, oh, you guys, y'all want to do a horror movie? Cool, here's Halloween. Like,
right.
They grew up with this movie just like many other people did, and they are passionate. They know Michael Myers, and I would argue that the production of this took fans' needs and desires into account, and I would argue that is a blessing and a curse to this film. But I don't, for once, think, oh, they are the wrong people to work on this movie, right?
Yeah, I'd also add that, you know, I'm a fan of what they did on television as well. With Eastbound and Down in particular. And I think that there are some real interesting moments of unexpected horror in that show. So, you know, to me, like, it wasn't entirely like, you know, out of the blue they decided to do this.
Right.
And I've listened to Danny McBride on several podcasts over the years, and he's a big horror fan as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, looking back over some of David Gordon Green's filmography, I mean, a lot of it does deal with rural, small town areas and kind of the certain issues that, you know, haunt their families and things like that. So I do think that there is, you know, a reason why they were chosen to take over the franchise.
Well, and we discuss many, many times in this podcast, like, how closely related comedy and horror are to each other. So, honestly, if there's a filmmaker who is known for making one particular type of film and is going into horror, honestly, comedy's the best one, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very natural segue, or like moving out of horror and moving into comedy. That's the other direction we've seen, but the two genres are very linked. And I think in terms of, I mean, I can certainly understand if people don't like this movie, they might point the finger at these two because they wrote and directed it, and it's really about, you know, the new creative vision. But I also think that as beloved as this franchise is, there's a lot of people who feel like it has lost its way over various iterations, right? Like, when you hear people defend the franchise, they are either like big Jamie fans and they will advocate for like that middle stretch, or they will say like, oh, Resurrection was terrible, it almost killed everything. So in a certain way, I feel like you had to take a risk and hire some unorthodox choices because, like, Blumhouse didn't want to risk fucking this up. They wanted someone who was going to bring the passion and the energy, but also like somebody who was going to do something a little bit new / old.
Well, and it's both.
It's both, yeah.
Well, and Richard, I'm fascinated too that what spurred your interest in this franchise was the zombie films, and those are two films. I really don't like his first movie because I do think it's a compromised vision. I also don't love his backstory for Michael. Like, I know people gripe about his, you know, dialogue and how it's a bunch of hillbilly trash, whatever. Like, it's fine. I just don't like it that much. Although I will say I do, after 12 years distance and watching the director's cut, I do really enjoy his Halloween 2. I think it's a flawed film, but I think it's an interesting film that tackles Final Girl PTSD in a very interesting way that I think this film thinks it's trying to do. And again, we'll discuss that as we kind of get further into the plot, but
I'll add that I think that Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, that's my favorite after John Carpenter's original.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And before this one came out in 2018, I actually wrote about how Zombie handles trauma in a really interesting way in that film. So yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying there.
And listeners, if you're like, no, that movie still sucks, Laurie Strode's annoying as fuck, I will really implore you, that director's cut is a completely different film than what the theatrical cut is, and I think in the theatrical cut, it doesn't do it. It kind of does something similar to this film, where it doesn't have as much focus on Laurie and her trauma, and so she comes across as whiny and annoying. Whereas in the director's cut, it does devote more time and scenes to her, so it becomes understandable. But I'm sorry, we're not talking about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
Well, but and therein lies part of the problem, right? Like, these movies are so steeped in each other's DNA, and particularly as we get into the meat of this 2018 remake / sequel, like there's so many pieces where you have to almost stop and say, okay, well, this is what it's doing, and it's a callback to a film that it said it wasn't going to address, and it's not part of this lineage anymore, and yet we're still acknowledging it because we want to pay attention to the legacy. Like, this is such a weird fucking franchise.
It is, but I like this choose your own adventure aspect of it. I like that you can be like, well, I like this timeline, so that's my Halloween franchise. Like, I own every fucking film in this set, but if I'm pulling movies out to watch, I'm watching 1, 2, and H2O. Now, granted, I'm of the mindset that I'm looking forward to seeing kills and ends, because I do think that it's going to address a lot of the issues that I have with this 2018 film. Yeah. And I'm wondering if those films will somehow retroactively make me like this first film more. Like, that's what that's my hope going into both of these movies.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that they were conceived as a proper franchise and we're going to be able to see them almost as a whole. But part of me also needs these films to stand on their own. And I think this version mostly does that. I have concerns or worries about what we're going to get in Kills, so I'm intrigued. I mean, folks, you can listen to us talk about it at length next week when we have a Patreon episode of it. But also, I am interested in the comparisons that people have made specifically around Laurie's PTSD and trauma, and when people focus on how her character has changed or how they've shifted that narrative between this and H2O. And of course, we also have a Patreon episode on that. So go do everything, do all the things.
But Joe, so we've got Richard, you know why he's connected to this. What is your connection with this franchise?
So I'll admit that this is probably my least favorite of the big franchises, and I think part of that is that I did come to it rather late, but also I just don't find Michael Myers as compelling a villain. Like, Friday the 13th is a mess, but it's such a hot mess. There's something satisfying about seeing each of those different films try to take a different stab at it. Halloween feels like a very compromised vision. Like, everybody tries something that is respectful, but I don't feel like they always have something new to say. I think it really gets lost up its own butt when we get into the Jamie stuff, because that's when slashers aren't doing as well and they didn't really know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of like you. I like the first film a lot, but not as much as most people. So, like, if people say, oh, it's a classic, I'm like, well, have you seen Black Christmas?
It's interesting, and it's funny because my relationship with Black Christmas is kind of the opposite as you. It's similar to yours with Halloween, because I saw it very late in life, and my first thing was like, well, this isn't very impressive. It's kind of boring. And of course, I rewatched it, a decade later, and was like, holy fuck! Like, what was I thinking? The original Halloween is a film where I remember my I was a kid and my uncle put it on. It was probably AMC, Richard, and
probably, yep.
And I remember watching the title, the music's playing and the pumpkin's going, and my uncle goes, "Ooh, Halloween," and my dad goes, "Shh," because my mom was in the kitchen. So basically, my dad was trying to show my 5-year-old self some Halloween without my mom noticing.
Yeah, it's way too scary for kids. And I'm sure lots of parents will come to me and say, actually, this is good gateway horror. But I mean, I think there's a reason why the original film is a classic. Even though it doesn't touch me the way it touches a lot of other people, it's hard to argue that Carpenter hasn't made the perfect synthesis between plot and female friendship and a really scary monster who is just unknowable, and then that fucking score.
I mean, that's the story, right? Because there was that famous story about the original film where they screened it and the people were like, this isn't scary. And it's because there was no score attached to it. And then they added the score and people were jumping out of their seats.
Yeah. There's a reason that John Carpenter doesn't make movies, but he continues to make scores. The man is a genius.
I love the music. I think that's part of the appeal of it to me too. And even thinking about this 2018 version, I mean, I played that soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
all through the season into November because it's new Carpenter music.
Yeah.
And I think that always, that's something that always gets me.
It gets you in the mood, right?
Yeah. I love his, independent discography that's not attached to the movies that he's been doing. Those are really cool, but there's just something about, hearing Carpenter's music attached to a film that just gets me every single time.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you both. Like, no matter what, if someone says, "Oh, there's a new Halloween theme cover out," I'm like, "Fuck it!" I can play this entire theme in my head, like without any aid. But god damn it, if you tell me there's a new cover, I will play it. But to this day, and I may get shit for this, but my favorite version of this theme is actually the synthesized Halloween 2 theme. Like, I have the Halloween 2 soundtrack, and that's actually what I listen to get me into the spooky spirit, if you will.
I love the idea that people play horror scores independently of watching movies. Like, Richard, you probably wouldn't know this about me, but I'm almost like tone deaf when it comes to hearing scores. Like, they really have to stand out for me to notice them. This is absolutely one of the cases where I always do.
Okay, well, everyone, so why don't we discuss how we got here? Because I'm going to tell you right now, there is...
we'll be back in 5 hours.
There is a plethora of information. A lot of it, I'm not going to lie, is kind of useless. I was, like, parsing through all my notes, on my research, and I was like, oh my god, like, the minutia that people are putting into, like, production histories on this thing. I'm like, oh my god, like, granted, good for y'all, it's great. It's just, like, I don't need to know that, like... Danny McBride said, "Oh, well, Michael Myers is a hulking beast, and we wanted to keep him that way," or whatever, Like, okay.
Every soundbite, it's well documented.
It is very well documented, despite the fact that this Blu-ray has not that many special features on it, which I'm assuming they're going to be saving
they're waiting.
Yeah.
We're going to get a David Gordon Green trilogy box set at the end of all of this.
But... let's go back in time to August of 2009. I promise it won't take long. So, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 comes out, and after that, he's like, before that even comes out, he's like, I'm not making another sequel. Fuck that. 2 days after this movie comes out, despite underperforming because it opened up against the 3D film The Final Destination, the Weinstein Company goes, no, we're going to make a sequel. It's going to be Halloween 3D. And I feel like that was a reaction to The Final Destination.
Probably, yep.
I don't know.
Because 3D was so hot. Remember those days when they tried to bring it back?
So they're like, hey, next summer, so less than a year from now, we're going to bring you Halloween 3D with Patrick Lussier directing and Todd Farmer writing. At the time, they were actually working on Drive Angry 3D for Warner Brothers. It was going to pick up right after Halloween 2. Laurie was going to be arrested, but unfortunately, the wrench in their plan was Scout Taylor Compton was not going to return. And I tried to figure out why she would decline this, and she made The Runaways around this time, the Joan Jett movie with Kristen Stewart.
So she was trying to be a quote-unquote serious actress.
That was my thinking. I was like, oh, you know what? She got this gig, and she was like, no. And not to shade Scout Taylor Compton, like... it makes sense,
Sure.
Especially after the hell she went through in 2, but still. So, there were issues. They were like, oh, we're making it too fast. So Bob Weinstein delays pre-production until Drive Angry comes out. Unfortunately, Drive Angry was released in February of 11 and flopped super fucking hard, despite the fact that it's a really fun movie and everyone should see it. It was delayed again, and then they were like, cool, we're going to do it. But then they're like, no, we're not going to do it because Lussier, Farmer, and Weinstein are going to prioritize a Hellraiser reboot, which, as we all know, did not happen.
That is a tale for another time. Don't make me upset.
So flash forward a couple of years to 2014, we're reviving it again because Scout Taylor Compton is like, you know what? Never mind. I'll come back and do this.
Because The Runaways didn't do so well.
Yes.
Again, no shade. It's just kind of like, oh, I had a guaranteed job and then I left to do something experimental. The experimental thing didn't come back. I want to come back to the sure job. But
now we're not doing 3D. No. It's going to be a found footage film because do you know what's really popular at this time?
Paranormal Activity. But apparently none of the cast and crew liked this concept, so they scrapped that as well, which... Yeah, because that's a garbage idea. I'm sorry, folks. No.
Did y'all follow all this as it was happening? Because I definitely was. So reading all this stuff, I was like, oh my god, I'm getting flashbacks to, like, reading all... This is why I don't trust things when they're announced. I need to see production starting.
Yeah, I followed it intently, actually.
Richard's like, I actually wrote a book about it, and
Well, I was really intrigued by the idea of having Laurie as kind of being like the new shape, so to speak, that was kind of set up at the end of 2. I thought that was a really interesting idea. And I know there was some talk about setting it like in an asylum at one point, and that sounded really interesting. But then by the time they got to the found footage thing, it's like, well, I feel like they don't really have a grasp on what they want to do.
No.
And like, I love found footage movies. Like, I was there at midnight for all the Paranormal Activity movies.
Yep.
But I feel like Halloween is not the franchise to do that with.
No, they were obviously chasing fads, which, as we've talked about numerous fucking times, the Weinsteins are nothing if not cash hungry like fuckers. So obviously they were looking at what the trends were, but the fact is all of the trends that they were chasing had already been made. So by the time the film had have come out, it would have felt like just passé. It would have been bad. And you're right, Richard. Like, Halloween as a found footage film, I mean, hey, we ended up already kind of getting that with Resurrection, and it ain't good.
Ooh, yeah. But although I will say that aspect of Resurrection is one of the more interesting parts of that film.
There. Okay.
But nevertheless, though, you're right, Joe. Like, they're too late to this because they're planning this in 2014, which is when the 5th Paranormal Activity is coming out, and then the final entry would come out the next year, and we all know that movie's a piece of shit.
Yeah, it's already passé, for sure.
Yeah. So, going into 2015 now. So, now we're looking at Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan to write a new Halloween film. And in case you don't know these guys, they are the co-writers of all 3 Feast films. They are the co-writers of Saw 4, 5, 6, and 7. And they are the co-writers of both Collector movies, with Dunstan directing both of them.
Right. So this would have been more hard-edged.
Yes, but this is going to be more of a recalibration, quote-unquote, instead of a reboot. They were going to call it Halloween Returns. It was going to be a standalone film, but it was also going to act as a sequel to Halloween 2. So it was going to ignore 3 and moving forward.
Wait, where have I heard this before? This is all seeming like a bit of deja vu.
I know!
We're just repeating the same cycles over and oh my god, we are all Laurie Strode.
But here's the thing though, and I actually like this idea. They were gonna set it in 1988, and it was gonna involve Michael Myers escaping his execution from a power surge and going on a rampage in the town of Russellville, Illinois. I like the idea of doing it as a period piece. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. I mean, they were gonna try to film it in Europe though, weren't they?
Yeah, it didn't happen because they wanted to film it in Serbia, and they were like, no, we can't do that because that's not
just
Serbia.
So funny.
I feel like this was around the same time also where they were going to do a period piece of Friday the 13th, and they talked about doing it as like a Dazed and Confused in the 70s kind of slasher film. So I'm not sure which one came first, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Friday the 13th idea was circling around and then the Weinsteins kind of...
Right. You know what? I think you're right, because so I have read one of the drafts of Nick Antosca's Friday the 13th like reboot script, and that one is very much. And honestly, I think you're right, Richard, because it was around the time I started writing for Bloody, which would have been 2015.
Oh my god! And then don't we get The Final Girls the very next year, which is like a period slasher film?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Weinsteins knew to play the game, but here's the thing, though. I think that they were trying to do this because they were running out of time with these rights, because by the end of 2015, Dimension Films no longer has the rights to Halloween because Halloween Returns failed to go to production. So, we could have gotten a Hellraiser Revelation situation with Halloween Returns, so maybe it's for the best.
Oh, 100%. Take everything away from those fuckers.
So the rights go back to Miramax, and in May of 2016, Blumhouse Productions and Miramax are announced to be co-financing a new film. Universal Pictures is going to distribute it through the studio's output deal with Blumhouse, and around this time, they also convinced John Carpenter to come on as a producer.
Smartest thing they could have done.
I think I can speak for all of us, right? Like, that is kind of what...
You needed the sign-off.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when the rights were acquired by Blumhouse, okay, this is the weirdest piece of trivia that I found about this. So Adam Wingard was one of the first people in talks to direct this movie. What I found was he dropped out after being sated by an email of encouragement from Carpenter. So Carpenter was like, hey man, like, I have faith in you, good job. And Wingard was like, oh, you know what? I'm good.
Yeah,
He
like
said,
mission accomplished. Like, I don't need anything more. I don't need to risk making a bad movie because John Carpenter thinks I'm good.
which, because around this time, do you know what Adam Wingard was making? 2016.
Death Note.
Blair
It's after that,
Witch.
Blair Witch.
Mm-hmm,
So he should have stuck with this.
Which, of course, is like, because it was secret, right? It was the woods until they announced it, like at the festival premiere.
Yeah, it was for TIFF.
Oh, God. I like Blair Witch, but I know you don't.
I do not know.
So, February of 2017, Green and McBride are announced as handling screenwriting duties, with Green directing and Carpenter advising the project. Early on, apparently, the script did have Laurie's daughter, Jamie Lloyd, in the film. But after a couple rewrites, they changed her to Karen. I don't know. Do y'all remember this too? Because Danielle Harris publicly,
Oh, yeah. She campaigned.
She did. And here's my thing. I'm like, you know what? You do you. Good for you. People, and especially fans, were so mean to her. I saw so many people that were like, oh, what? Sorry, bitch, your career isn't taking off and you want to cash in on this? Nope, sorry, not for you. And I was like, who are you to say this to someone? Like, come on.
I've always thought that she was really cool. I mean, I really liked the Jamie character in the movies. And so, like, I would have been, completely on board with her returning. And she's done a lot of other cool horror stuff. So, yeah, I saw some of that, too. And I'm just like, I don't understand why people are so upset that she wants to return to a franchise that she clearly loves and has, gone to conventions and talked about.
Yeah, she is a horror enthusiast through and through. Like, she has never turned her back on the genre. She talks about it proudly all the time. I can understand people saying, oh, you're in the movies that I don't like from this franchise, but that is garbage. She is a total ally.
But you know what? Okay, so here's my thing. And I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I'm so happy we get Laurie Strode back in this movie. I will watch any movie with Jamie Lee Curtis, like whatever.
Oh, God, here we go. That commercial.
No, but that being said, she is not the nicest about horror films. And she has turned her back on them. I mean, which, whatever. Like, her career went places. Obviously, it's great. But she has made statements about the horror genre that I'm just like, oh, it just rubs me the wrong way sometimes. And I've always gotten, like, kindness and respect towards the genre from Danielle Harris. So that's kind of my issue here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people recognize that Jamie Lee Curtis is a workhorse. Like, she will show up, she will do the work, she will promote the shit out of your movie, and then she will collect her paycheck and she will move on. And again, like, no shame. It's not like she has to bend over backwards for, like, a film, 40 years later. She obviously thought there was enough here to come back several times. So that's great. But yeah, I mean, there have definitely been projects where you're like, okay, you're showing up because the check cleared. Got it. That's fine.
And I can't fault her for that. But it's also like, as a fan, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, oh, I want to keep this sacred image of you in my head.
She's a fair weather actress. She shows up and sometimes she goes away.
Did you guys ever watch Scream Queens?
We did. Yes.
Yeah. She was interesting in that.
I love Scream Queens, even the second season, which everyone's like, oh, it really fell to shit. And I was like, no, it just got dumber. Like, that's all it is. Like, and if you don't like that, that's fine. But like, I was on board for all of it.
Trace is a big fan of like women behaving badly and also like shows and movies going to the point of camp ridiculousness.
Well, yeah, yes, yep. Nothing to add to that.
Go ahead, try to fight me on that.
No, I was going to expand, but I was like, no, you actually like really succinctly described me. So yes. Okay, so filming on this, it lasts from January to February of 2018 in Charleston, South Carolina. Response to the film's first test screening did lead them to schedule reshoots in Charleston in June of that year. I don't know what those reshoots were, so I'm sure they're out there. Actually, I'm sure they might even be on the Halloweenies podcast episode of this film. So if you want like really, really, really like in-depth deep dive into the production of this film, please go check out Halloweenies' episode on it. Although I'm pretty sure they all hated it.
But they'll also talk about it for about 3 hours. So you will get that depth of coverage. Yeah,
absolutely. It had its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 8th, 2018. Where were you that night, Joe?
I was in the theater. I was reviewing the film. It was not one of my finer moments.
Why is that? Please explain.
So this was an interesting experience, and I'm sure you both had the opportunity to go to like big premieres, and I think it's easy to get swept up in the energy. Like Jason Blum was there, Jamie Lee Curtis was there. It was the first time the film had ever been screened for a public audience. People were losing their shit. It was midnight, so it's like the most hardcore fans ever. And then I had to watch the movie. I mostly liked it. There were a couple of quibbles. Dr. 13. And then I had to immediately run out of the theater and try to write a reasonable sounding review at about 2:30 in the morning. And it's not my best work, and I don't think it's an accurate review of the film. Like, my opinions have really shifted on it over time, but at that moment, I thought it was a slam dunk. I thought it was really good at handling Laurie's PTSD and various things. And I think it's, if you ever want to see what festival brain looks like to a film critic, go and read my review of this film.
Do you have one of these types of experiences, Richard? Not with this film specifically, but like any festival film or something.
Not a festival film, but I will tell you that I got a last minute assignment when X-Men Apocalypse came out.
Oh no, Richard, no.
And I stayed up really late writing it, and it was something of a fever dream of it's not my best work, like you said.
That is me and Don't Breathe. My first big South by Southwest opened with a surprise release of Don't Breathe. I am more than a little inebriated, and I went home at 3 a.m. and wrote that review while still inebriated, and not my best work.
No, I think sometimes, and I'm not suggesting any of these films necessarily are indicative of that, but it's really hard to do a film justice, even a film that's like bombastic and actiony or a little ridiculous if it's X-Men Apocalypse, but it's hard to do a film justice and really give it the kind of critical thought that it deserves to try to work with people's expectations in a review. Like when you're writing under the clock, like, oh, I've got to hit this deadline, or I've got to try to beat somebody else's review going up and them getting all the clicks. Like, I don't always think that we're doing our best work under those conditions.
Yeah, for me, just to go off on the subject a little bit, like that's one of the reasons why I've kind of moved more so into doing, features and essays and follow-up pieces rather than straight reviews, because I never liked the feeling of immediately seeing a movie and then having to write about it. I really like to take my time and think about it.
And I would say that you have done an excellent job of that. We actually referenced your recent piece on Candyman when we covered the film back in August. And it was so helpful for letting us work through our feelings and recognizing the point of view that we had compared to maybe other people's points of view and who the film was actually for. I think you found some really great success in doing some of these longer form, really in-depth editorials.
Thank you.
I also think that comes from, too, though. I mean, writing an editorial is, no matter how much distance you have from the film, it's so different. It's such a different frame of mind for me, at least, when writing a review. And I know that's not the same for everybody, but honestly, when I'm writing a review, I'm not always dipping into themes and analysis. I'm like, is this a competent movie? Is it good? Is it bad? Mm-hmm. I may take things into consideration, have a paragraph on, for Halloween 2018. Oh yeah, the way the film handles trauma, blah, blah, blah. This is what it's trying to say, blah, blah, blah. But an editorial where you're focusing on that really lets you hammer into that and just go to town, right?
Yeah. Go to town on the trauma. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, so yeah, this premieres at TIFF. Mostly positive reception from that, and then it's released theatrically about a little over a month later on October 19th, 2018. It grosses $76.2 million its opening weekend.
Mother.
I remember, I feel like estimates were in the 50s, and this just blew everything out of the water.
I mean, it was interesting because people knew it was going to be big. Once again, they were able to capitalize on the anniversary. They had Jamie Lee Curtis back again. They had John Carpenter, which is something that H2O didn't really have in the same capacity. Mm-hmm. And it felt like a watershed moment. And I remember people even saying, oh, this is going to be it. We're going to start seeing Nightmare on Elm Street come back. we're going to see Friday the 13th come back. Like, this is going to reinvigorate slashers to a degree we haven't seen since Scream, because there's so much money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And weirdly, it didn't happen. I mean, we know why with Friday the 13th, but...
Well, but so what I'll say is, I think that this really did help reinvigorate slashers, just not our classics. I mean, we're getting Scream in January, but obviously we know Friday the 13th is mired in a lawsuit and blah, 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 blah. But so many of these, like, direct-to-streaming or VOD releases or, like, smaller horror films, like, we've had a good amount of slashers this year. And... I'm not going to credit Halloween 2018 solely with that, but I do think it helped renew interest in the subgenre, and we're finally getting out of vampires, and we're bringing back in a slasher resurgence.
Fuck you, vampires and zombies. Slashers are back.
Anyway, okay, so this is the second best ever opening weekend of October, behind Venom, which I think came out like the week before. The biggest debut ever for Blumhouse, the highest grossing film of the Halloween franchise, period, just on the opening weekend alone.
I love that stat. It's so wild.
The second biggest horror opening weekend after It from the year before, which I think was like 123 million. Best performance for a film featuring a lead actress over 55 years old. Yeah, and it stayed in the number one spot its next weekend, grossing $32 million. Goes on to gross about $160 million domestically and $96 million internationally for a worldwide gross of roughly $256 million on a budget of $10 to $15 million.
Yeah.
But Universal claims to have spent an estimated $76 million on advertising. So we're looking at a profit of about $128 million, which is still nothing to, like, balk at.
Yeah, I will believe that marketing cost, because you could not go anywhere without seeing this movie.
But yeah, reception, we're looking at a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.8 out of 10. On Metacritic, it's got a 6.7 out of 10, and on Letterboxd, it's got a 6.6 out of 10. So everyone's kind of in the same boat there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people recognize that there's some good things, and there's also a couple of things that we're hoping they're going to course correct on in the sequels.
And I think that we'll be addressing some of those things in the plot summary.
Indeed. Let's begin. So we open the film at Smith's Grove Rehabilitation Facility. And we got two British investigative journalists. So we have Aaron, who is played by Jefferson Hall, as well as his colleague Dana, who is played by Rhiannon Rees.
This is British Ellie Kemper, and you cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah, not incorrect. And they're meeting with Dr. Sartain, who is played by Haluk Bilginer. And he is... I heard that groan.
Don't y'all feel immediately... I feel like immediately this film kind of sets it apart from the other films, because I know it's so silly, but it's like the way we open the film, it's just shots of close-ups on clocks, on eyeballs, on things. And I feel like immediately there's a sense of style in this film that you don't see in a lot of the sequels, which is honestly surprising to me, because the cinematographer of this, it was actually shot a lot of Vice Principals and The Righteous Gemstones. But also Paranormal Activity too. Who knew?
So the found footage connection made its way into this film regardless.
A little bit.
I agree with you. I remember they did prominently feature a lot of this in the trailers. But I remember being so awestruck by the visual of the checkerboard, where Michael Myers, who is, of course, partially voiced / consulted by Nick Castle and played physically by James Jude Courtney. But the scenes where Dana and Aaron are more or less antagonizing him with the mask here, I just think it really does set this film apart. Like, it's a pretty interesting way to open this film and reestablish the franchise.
Richard, what do you think? Like, do you like that this is what the film opens with? Because I will confess, I was actually surprised it didn't open with Laurie Strode.
Yeah, I like this, particularly in terms of the visuals of it. You know, I have thoughts about the podcasters. I think it's one of the weaker elements of the film, and I wasn't particularly interested in them or believed in their kind of work that they were doing. But yeah, the checkerboard thing and then them holding the mask out to him, like, I thought that was a really cool visual choice.
You should all be happy to know. So there are deleted scenes on this Blu-ray. They amount to about 12 minutes of footage. And in my research, apparently the original cut of this movie was about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And they cut 30 minutes, which included full scenes and extensions of scenes out for pacing.
Right.
And one of the deleted scenes on the Blu-ray is more podcasters. They are fucking in the shower.
Oh, don't need that for sure.
But here's the thing. So not all the stuff they cut is on this Blu-ray, which leads me to believe that yes, there is going to be maybe a master cut or at least a big edition somewhere that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get this out of the way now. So this is a movie where I've seen this about 4 or 5 times, and I like all of the parts in this movie. I like the podcasters. I don't think they need to die as late as 40 minutes into the movie, which is what happens. Like, they need to die way earlier.
Right.
But there's so much in this movie. We have the podcasters, we have Laurie, we have the kids, within the kids we have Allison and her thing. But then with Laurie we have Judy Greer, who's kind of in this movie.
Kind of.
It's a thing where I notice every time I watch it, I'm like, I just wish we had more of everything. And Joe, you kind of said to me earlier offline, you were like, this movie's too long. And I do agree with you, but at the same time, I'm like, it's not long enough, because I don't think anything is really given enough time to breathe. And so, when you see accusations about how the film handles trauma and how it's one-dimensional and lazy, I don't think that's true. I just don't think we're seeing all of it. Like, I want longer drunk Laurie at the dinner table. I want more scenes with Laurie and Karen interacting, or where they're actually having a conversation. And that's really where my issue lies with this film, is where I'm like, I like everything that they're doing and setting up, but then I just constantly want more of it. I feel like there's just not enough here, not enough things are being able to they're not given enough screen time to
shut up.
Okay, sorry, I'm done.
Let us refute this, because it's not that we need more of all of this. We need less of some of this and more of certain things. We need more Laurie and Karen and Allison. That is what people gravitate into in this film. Richard being like, I don't love these podcasters. Like, they feel like they were written by M. Night the way that he writes critics. Like, this is somebody who doesn't like podcasters, who thinks that they have $3,000 to throw away. Like,
they're investigative journalists. How dare you? I lost it. I was like, $3,000? Who the fuck has that as a podcaster?
Like these are just ridiculous characters. I know what they're doing in here as narrative constructs. They are here to usher the story along, to reintroduce Michael Myers, to introduce this Dr. Sartain, who also doesn't really need to be a character in here. We could just have the film open with Michael being transferred and the bus going off the road. Like, we have seen that in other films. That would have been fine.
Yeah, I think for me, like, every time I watch this film, I walk away thinking, I wish that we had more of, like, Vicky and Dave and Allison.
Yeah, because they're fun characters and we don't get to know them at all.
Yeah, and I'm always, like, so disappointed. Like, I tweet this, I think, probably, like, several times a year. And I'm always like, Vicky and Dave, like, I wish they had lived at least for one of the sequels.
Right.
And yeah, it's like, I feel like in the original, like, I feel like you get to spend time with Linda and Bob and, her whole group of friends. And this time they feel so quickly dispatched. And yet I think that they're the most fun to watch and the most interesting. Miles Robbins is, like, doing some really interesting, like, making some really interesting choices in this movie, I think.
Yeah, and he's such a great actor.
Yeah, and we really don't get to spend any time with.
And they're both killed off screen.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think we're going to see that get rectified in the sequels. I think we're going to get, like, harder, bloodier cuts.
I mean, so this is kind of also where, like, so they had, Ryan Turek on as an executive producer on this one. Maybe he's a producer. I think it's executive producer. And Ryan Turek, like, so when I saw this at Fantastic Fest, Blum came out and introduced it. He had Turek with him. He had Jamie Lee Curtis with him. And he was like, he called up Turek and he was like, and I love Ryan Turek. I think he's a great guy, really nice, great journalist, great producer, whatever.
Okay.
But he was like, we had him on this and he was, so that when making it, he could be like, oh no, the fans will like this. Oh no, the fans won't like that. Oh no, the fans will like this. Oh yeah, don't do that. The fans won't like that. And I heard that and I was like, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to go about it, because watching this, there's a lot of fan service in this movie. You know, there are things that if you're a fan of this franchise, you will notice visual cues.
Oh, yeah, there's homages up the ass in this movie.
But it's also kind of like, well, it's one fan. Like, I mean, yeah, he's kind of gauging what a community of fans is saying, but it's also kind of like, I feel like that's a weird way to go about the movie, because I feel like it, you know, I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but like things that, you know, maybe Green and McBride and their other co-writer, Jeff Fradley, like, I don't know, like, was there things that they had that Turek was like, nope, cut that out.
It didn't pass the superfan sniff test, right?
Yeah, exactly. But whatever. We'll get into it as we get into more fan stuff.
Okay, so yes, via these podcasters, we are reintroduced to Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. We learn a little bit of exposition about what has happened in the 40 years, because of course, in this version, she didn't become a headmistress of an elite Southern California school. In this case, she basically became Linda Hamilton from Terminator 2, but she also is twice divorced. She describes herself as a basket case, and we also learn that she has a daughter who was taken away by social services at age 12. So we are laying a foundation for a woman who has never been able to escape the past trauma that she has been through, and it has negatively impacted the relationship. So I think part of my problem with doing this is that for me, as somebody who really enjoys Halloween H2O, I'm immediately starting to draw comparisons between the way that Laurie Strode handled her PTSD with her son versus this older Laurie Strode who is still making some of those same calculated errors, for lack of a better term. And yeah, like, so then I'm watching the movie looking for those comparisons throughout, as opposed to just being able to say, cool, what is this Laurie 40 years later doing?
Yeah, I do think that the comparisons to H2O, I mean, they're apt, you know. I think that's always the thing is, you know, people are like, oh, which one handles her trauma better? And at the end of the day, it's, you know, pick your own adventure. Yeah,
a little bit.
I like this Laurie, honestly, and I like that she's messy, because I say messy in the sense that even with the conclusion of this film, where it's like, oh, she has this grandmaster plan, but then she's like immediately like thrown off the balcony by Michael Myers. I'm like, people are like, well, she's been waiting for 40 years. Why would that happen? I'm like, well, but she's a mess.
She's a mess, and he's an unpredictable monster. Just to earmark the fact that, yeah, there has been a lot of good work done on the comparisons between the two, the 20 and the 40. People can take a look at former guest Anya Stanley's piece for Collider, and Psychoanalysis has a full episode that they did for the Salem Horror Fest.
So, a little trick of editing here, too, and I actually want to know what y'all think of this. So, there is a deleted scene that is an extended version of the scene when she is having target practice with all, you know, her mannequins and stuff. It goes further to where she goes up to the mannequin, you know, she shoots a point blank in the head, then she goes inside. And she's cleaning all of her guns, and as she has this big revolver, she contemplates, looks at it, and puts it under her chin.
Oh.
And, like, actively contemplates suicide. And what stops her is the doorbell or the buzzer ringing from the podcasters.
I actually kind of like that.
I do too.
Oh, interesting. I don't think that would have played well.
Well, and I think that's why they cut it. I don't think it would have played well. But again, that's like, and maybe it's one-dimensional, but to me, I'm like, cool, there's another layer showing how fucked up she is right now.
Because I love that scene that comes later where she's waiting for the bus in the car. And, you know, to me, that always kind of felt like, you know, in some ways it could be a suicide scene. And so, yeah, I think that would have added an interesting layer to it. Yeah, I like that.
I think the film underestimates how interesting these scenes are with the like, and I get it, because they're probably like, hey, we got to get to the killing, but I really enjoy these quieter moments, and I do wish we had more time to let these breathe.
Well, I think what we're seeing is the age-old issues that we always encounter with slasher films, which is that we've got studios and marketing people who are in charge of this and saying, we need to get to the murders faster because our target audience of teenage boys wants to see the killing. And there's a whole audience that they're disregarding, like women and older fans and fans who don't have attention difficulties. Like, we can follow a story, we can appreciate character development.
Right.
And we often end up seeing a bit of a compromise where they'll give us a bit of character growth and then at a certain point, it's like, no, now we need to just have murders happening the whole time. And I do feel like this film doesn't hit that compromise point quite right. So we have to have all of these characters, and some of them we'd like to see more of. They don't last, like you said, Vicky. And then some of them, it's like, why are we even in here? Like, do we need a whole sequence where this son and father come upon the overturned bus? Like, it's moody as fuck. I think it's shot really well. I like the lightning in the background. It's really atmospheric. It's a good scene. But also, we could just have Deputy Hawkins show up on the crime scene and have all of these bodies be, like, grotesquely mutilated, and Dr. Sartain is there. Like, we don't need that. But it's in there because somebody said, oh, your target audience is going to be bored otherwise.
I really think that scene with the father and son in the car was the seed for Danny McBride's legacy of the white-tailed deer hunter. Like, it's the exact same plot, like, followed through for a whole 90-minute movie.
Interesting. Like, I don't think it's a bad scene, but I think we get that scene, and as a result, we don't get more of Allison or Karen or Laurie.
I agree with you, Joe, because I do like this scene, but you're right. Like, so we're leaving this scene in at the expense of cutting out, something else. And again, like, whatever the other, 13 minutes of deleted scenes that are not on this Blu-ray, like, I don't know what they contain. I know for a fact that Allison's chase scene is longer at some point, but we do not have that footage. And this is also, I guess, well, we're not there yet. Sorry, we're not there. But I like the dad and son scene because I like the humor in the whole dancing thing. Like, and I actually think the humor in this film works really well. I know it does not work well for everybody, but I really enjoy the moments of levity we have here.
Yeah, I like it too. I feel like, just as someone who's a big Danny McBride fan, like, I can tell that, those are his lines. Like, I can tell that someone wrote that. And so I really appreciate those elements. Like, even if every joke doesn't entirely land for me, I kind of appreciate the fact that I can see, okay, a writer with a voice did this, and it's not just a bunch of studio people putting things in. Yeah,
it doesn't feel cookie cutter in that regard. And I think, I'm someone who the comedy is more, it's maybe a little bit more miss than hit.
Right.
I do think that there are very funny parts of this, and I think they actually do work, and I recognize that my sense of humor is a little bit different from a lot of other folks, but I agree with you, Richard. I think, we dismiss the use of comedy in horror as though it somehow makes the film less effective, and I think it just makes it different. And there's a lot of horror films that we love and hold up that we say are super fucking scary. And it's like, that movie's also very funny. Like, there are moments of comedy in The Thing. There's a lot of comedy in the Scream films. Like, we love those movies. You don't hear people trash talking it.
And that's something also that, Ari Aster has talked about recently, where, he said that people, say his movies are horror, but he considers them more to be like
family comedies.
Yeah. Which I think is hilarious. And like the one that he's doing next with Joaquin Phoenix, he describes it as a dramatic comedy, but then like the plot sounds absolutely terrifying.
Right. Yes. But you mean you're saying that horror and comedy can like cross over sometimes? What? I think with this film though, because there are people that are going to be like, oh, I don't like the comedy in it, and like it takes something like, and we'll talk about it later, but the Bánh Mi scene, which you could lift because it's just kind of there.
Yeah.
But then you have something like Julian, because I've seen people complain, oh, I don't like that character of Julian because he takes what should be a very tense and scary scene, which is Vicky's getting killed, and he's making kind of these quips and one-liners, and he's diffusing the tension in the scene. And while I understand that as a complaint, like just at its face value, I disagree that it diffuses the tension, because to me, it's like, this kid is acting like anyone would. Like, oh shit, I gotta get out of this room. So, I don't know. Like, it's a balancing act, and for me, the balancing act works well. But again, I see why it wouldn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's maybe put a pin in that for now, and we'll introduce a few more characters. So, we have the Nelson household. So we have Father Ray, who is played by Toby Huss,
and he has peanut butter on his penis.
There's a piece of comedy where I'm like, do we need this in here?
I like it.
It does tell us who he is, right? Like, he's a dad who doesn't trust the dude that his daughter is dating, and he's a bit like, oh, Dad, you're so cringy. Come on, just don't.
I mean, look, this to me is on the same level as the girls walking down the street in the first movie, right? When Linda's like, oh, I always forget my chemistry book and my algebra book and my blah, blah, blah. Like, we're just having time to sit with these characters and live in their existence. And this is a dad that jokes about his penis openly in front of his daughter.
God.
At breakfast.
I think more to me, I really like Toby Huss. I've seen him in other things, and part of me is like, well, don't put in a great character actor and then underutilize him, because I could have just as easily seen Karen as a single mother with a daughter, and she's trying to do better than she had with her single mother.
Yeah, but we need his body later.
But we don't,
no,
because we don't have murders all the time. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he is in here so that he can be murdered later.
Exactly, for sure.
Okay, Karen, Judy Greer, again, underutilized, but the good thing is that she survives, so I'm pretty sure that we're going to get a bit of course correction in future films.
Well, and hopefully she gets to grieve her husband, because I know there's not really time to grieve him at the end of this movie, but man, she seems unfazed by that.
Yeah, that's. I think that's one of my main complaints in the movie too, is that there's not a lot of time for anybody to grieve. Like, even the Julian, like his babysitter getting killed, which he seems to really like his babysitter.
Yeah.
Do we even see him again?
No, I think he just runs out of the house.
Yeah.
Julian's still like running around Haddonfield somewhere.
I do like his like comedic like oh shit moment, but like at the same time it's like, I don't know, like seeing like a human being that like and that you're close to just like brutally murdered in front of you, I feel like there should be some kind of sympathetic reaction to that. And yeah, again with Toby Huss's character, I mean, like, he's brutally murdered, and like Judy Greer is just like, all right, well, we got to take care of Michael. So
I will shed a tear afterwards. Right now, I have to stand at the bottom of the stairwell with a shotgun.
She doesn't really see him, but like Laurie gives her a look that's like, ooh, girl, he is
You're a
not
widower
of this
now.
world anymore.
Yeah. You know what? We'll handle flower arrangements after this is all over. Right now, I need you to act as bait. Get your ass down to the bottom of the cell. Okay. Yes. And then we have Allison, who is played by Andy Matichak. I like her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like this is giving her the same opportunity to show the range that Jamie Lee Curtis gets.
Yeah. I will agree with this. But again, I'm sitting here like, oh, I want more from her, because I think she's very genuine. She's empathetic. She's compassionate. Like,
yep.
I like watching her. But then, I mean, what? She disappears for
so
the third
long.
act.
I honestly, I almost always forget about her, and then I'm like, oh right, she's still running through the woods. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Now there is at least a deleted scene. Like we get more from her. Like, we get her walking down the street. I think it's her introduction, and she sees a dog hanging from a tree, and people are trying to pull it down. And then Michael's watching her from the distance.
Okay.
We get another scene with her. Oh, it's when Vicky basically tells her like, "Hey, I can't go to the dance tonight because I have this last minute babysitting gig." And we get more scenes, like another moment between her and Cameron. So there is more time with these kids, and I think again, I get why it's cut for pacing or whatever, but I think that having more scenes like this in here would make the the teen slasher segment in the second half of the film seem stand out less, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It would feel more organic.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of the friends, yes, we've got Vicky, who's played by Virginia Gardner, and she has quietly grown on me over the years. Like, I love her. I first saw her in the Marvel TV show Runaways, and I was like, she's really bad. And then I saw Starfish.
Was good at Runaways.
I mean, she's fine, but she's not great. Like, she's not the best person in that cast, so she kind of recedes.
I haven't seen it, but she's in this indie movie called Starfish.
She's fucking great in it.
Okay. But the thing with Vicky is, so again, and this is later, but the one conversation she has with Julian where they're discussing, like, oh, you're getting wee, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. She gets more to play off of in that scene than Allison gets in this entire movie.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she also gets to show comedic chops as well as get to play the, conventional scream queen kind of role there briefly. So I think the problem with Allison is that she's the Debbie Downer protagonist, right? Like, she's the one who's just trying to reconnect with her grandma. She's dealing with an overprotective mother. and then she's got a shitty boyfriend. Like, that's Allison's arc in this first film.
I also feel like she's isolated for so much of it. So, like, you never really get to see her, like, interact in a group setting. Like, I wish that party scene had gone on a little bit longer. Because, I mean, like, that's so much of the fun of, John Carpenter's original is that, like, Laurie is talking to her friends on the phone. She's, like, going over to the houses. Like, she's in the car listening to Don't Fear the Reaper with Annie. Yeah. Like, I feel like you get all of those interesting moments, but then Allison is mostly isolated. Or it's, scenes with her family that don't really show who she is, like, outside of this family dynamic.
But that's where the overcrowded narrative comes in, right? Yeah. Like, we have to keep cutting back to different characters, and so it's not even that Allison gets lost in the mix, it's just that because she's not given as much compelling material, like, she probably has the same amount of screen time as, like, Judy Greer, or actually, even more, Jamie Lee Curtis, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
But she's just, like, there's nothing dynamic here, but that's also kind of where it feels like, I mean, we knew they were setting up a potential trilogy with this film, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it does feel like setup, which is why I'm hoping that these sequels, again, after I see Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, I'll walk back and watch this and be like, oh, you know what? Because I know where it's going. Here we go. I'm good. I like this movie more now.
Right. So my thing is that, and, you heard me say it off the top, I think you could excise the entire Dr. Sartain arc here, because there really isn't much to it, unless we're going to do some kind of weird Cult of Thorn bullshit later on. This idea of a doctor who is so obsessed with his patient, it feels like it's only in here because we need a Dr. Loomis character, but then they decide to pervert or corrupt this character. But then by killing him, it doesn't end up going anywhere. So I just regret all the time and energy that we have wasted on this character. Like, why do we need to see him kill Hawkins? Why do we then need to see him get killed? Like,
so, no, a question for both of you, because I will address this. You're right. It is lazy. It is not done very well. And yes, him dying immediately, you're just like, well, what was the point of that? Mm-hmm. The only reason he exists is to get Michael to Laurie's house.
Right, because Michael doesn't have any connection to Laurie in this.
Right. So my question to you two is, cool, okay, that's fine. Let's cut out Sartain. How do we get Michael to Laurie's house?
I mean, he could just chase Allison.
Yeah.
Like, literally, we could go from the cemetery, we could go from the scene where the fat, queer-coded friend of Cameron gets killed in the motion sensor
Oscar.
Light scene. Oscar, thank you.
By the way, my favorite scene in the film.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm sorry, in terms of horror, like a set piece, like a scary set piece.
Right.
I actually wanted it to be longer, the motion sensor light sequence.
Always. And, I mean, our fucking common concern here is like, I needed more, but also I need less of this other bullshit. Like, think about it. If we didn't have to follow the fucking doctor, we could have had a longer scene there. We could have had more of Richard's, let's have them talk at the party. Let's actually, like, have Vicky and Allison interact a little bit more. Let's actually allow some of these characters to do things. And instead, it's like, well, how do we get Michael to Laurie's house? It's like, after Oscar dies, she runs through the woods to Grandma's house. There, I fucking solved it. I'm a magician.
I'm sorry.
It's just, like, this feels so needlessly overcomplicated, and I do think part of it is that we're trying to set up a few more set pieces, we're trying to set up a few more kills, and I get so worried with the marketing of the second one where it's like, hey, have you met a firefighter? They're all fucking dead in this town now. And I'm just like, no, that is not the lesson we needed you to learn from Halloween 2018. It was, hey, we really like the 3 generations and the trauma, and then kill a person every, 25 minutes.
There you go.
I think the other thing about Sartain is that, I don't think that the actor is interesting. I feel like I could forgive the fact that he's disposable if we had, a compelling actor. I mean, right. Donald Pleasance is amazing and irreplaceable, but, this actor is not anywhere close to this level, and so it just feels like, they got this, kind of...
Goofy Albert Einstein lookalike.
Yeah, who just, I feel like he just doesn't fit the film. Like, if they got a really interesting character actor,
right,
who had done something interesting with the character, but I don't find that performance interesting at all.
Well, question for you then, put Malcolm McDowell in this role.
I'd be all for that.
Yes, right? Because immediately there's probably a very long list of really interesting dynamic actors that we think, oh, they're bringing such kooky energy or just, something that's going to punch up these scenes. Because you're right, Richard, there's really, and no shade to this actor, I haven't seen him in anything else, but this character does not pop off screen. So even when he is doing wackadoodle things like, oh, you're just randomly killing a deputy for reasons we don't fully understand because you're obsessed with evil and darkness, that should be so weird and interesting and compelling. And instead I'm just like, cool, you just killed Will Patton and now I'm actually really mad at you.
Yeah, it needed like a Donald Sutherland or a Malcolm McDowell kind of figure to bring something interesting. Yeah,
and because I don't like Malcolm McDowell in Rob Zombie's Halloween movies, but like it is
he's
what
an
it
asshole.
is. Yeah, and granted, his role in the second one, like I've come to like over time once I really separated it from Donald Pleasance's incarnation of the character. But yeah, I mean, obviously Malcolm McDowell's going to pop in this role with his 5 minutes of screen time.
I just think even this film is very white. Like, we basically have 2 actors of color. We've got Julian, and then we've got whatever the fuck is going on with this cowboy hat wearing, presumably, sheriff, that maybe we'll see more of in successive films.
I liked him too. But we gotta cancel Halloween.
I think he's interesting, but again, I'm just like, I don't know your name. I don't know what your deal is. He disappears completely. Like, we've just got all of these generic white police officers.
I don't dig the cowboy hat in Illinois.
I mean, the cowboy hat is a choice.
No, you know what? Okay. I mean, you know what it reminds me of? It's fucking Creighton Duke from Jason Goes to Hell.
Yes, it is. Oh, okay. Oh my God, let's get that actor in, whose name I've now forgotten. But think of that energy that he brought to that movie. I 100% agree with you, Richard. Like, we needed a different actor if we were going to keep this storyline in, because it is snoozy when it should be wackadoodle what the fuck.
But it's brief. It's brief, luckily.
But it's not, Trace. Think about, I mean, you're right in the fact that it's probably like 5 minutes total.
Right.
But at the same time, that's 5 minutes that we could have been spending with all of these other people. Like, your criticism is I needed more.
Yeah.
And your more is going to this fucking guy.
It's fair. No, that's totally fair. You're right.
Okay. I'm sorry, folks. We are bouncing around a lot, but we have thoughts. Okay, so yeah, we're introduced to these kids. We do the exposition stuff. It's more about like grandma and what's happened over the last 40 years. Grandma's a hot mess. Got it.
And I wonder if that's an issue too, right? Because obviously they called this movie Halloween, so noobs would come into it and be like, "Oh, I'm watching a Halloween movie," but it's the only one. So it whatever. Because you know those people that did that, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's a bunch of people who are like, I'm not going to watch 10 other movies, even though I've been told I only had to watch one. It's like, no, I bought a ticket and I went to the theater.
And here's the thing. I don't mind. I like that concept. Hey, you know what? There's 10 sequels. You're overwhelmed by it. You're intimidated by it. Fine. Forget it. You only have to watch the first one and you're good. But as a result of that does mean the first half of this movie is a lot of, let me catch you up to speed just in case.
I don't have an issue with that because I do think that for folks like us who have a relationship to the franchise, I'm using this exposition to help me delineate between the other, like where the franchise fractured and went into different timelines. Like, I'm using this information to be like, okay, this is who Laurie Strode is in this timeline. That's important for me because I'm then not going to confuse her with the headmistress or the chick with the bad wig who went to the hospital. Because that wig is terrible.
All right.
Okay, so let's talk about Allison's shitty boyfriend, Cameron, who is played by Dylan Arnold. What do we think of Cameron?
I mean, he's fine. I feel like he's the typical high school boyfriend asshole. But again, like, in terms of the decision of, like, which characters to kill, like, I feel like he could have easily went, and you save, her friends for another movie. I mean, I know he's Cameron's going to be in this next one, and I know he has some relation to another character.
Yeah, so I actually have an answer for you, and I have an answer to also why he wasn't killed and why he literally just disappears from this movie. So his last name is Elam. He is the son of the bully from the first movie that pushes down Tommy Doyle and the pumpkin, and he's like throwing like bricks at the Myers house, and Loomis is like, Lonnie, get your ass out of here. But here's the thing. There is another deleted scene, and it is after Cameron, kisses that girl, and he throws Allison's phone in the pudding, which really should not fuck up the phone, by the way. It's not liquid. So after that, and before Allison connects with the schlubby friend who's going to get killed in the motion sensor place, we have Cameron chasing after Allison after dumping her phone in the pudding. He gives her phone. He apologizes. He keeps apologizing, saying, hey, this is what happened with that girl. I'm sorry. I handled it really poorly, which I appreciated because I was like, wow, he really turned into an asshole like super quick because he wasn't like this before this scene.
Correct.
So he says, I didn't handle it. I'm really sorry. Please, let's go back and have a good time. Unfortunately, the cops come up because they're imposing a curfew. Cameron, gets really fucking defensive. He clearly doesn't like cops. It's inferred that it's because of his dad. His dad has been in and out of jail a lot.
Right.
And then they make fun of Cameron's dress, and he tells them to fuck off, so they cuff him. He goes to jail. When this is happening, the schlubby friend Oscar walks up, and Cameron's going, hey man, please make sure Allison gets home safe.
Right.
Why was this not in the movie?
Yeah, like that scene sounds essential, and I'm interested, Richard. I talked about this with Trace offline. I feel like part of this is that they want to keep him as a bit of an asshole because part of this film's narrative is that like it's about women sort of taking charge and being in control, having agency, and so on. So I couldn't help but wonder if this was not only a way to isolate Allison and get her and Oscar off by themselves, but maybe to try to like solidify that message of, okay, all of these men are kind of pricks and the girls are better off on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's interesting. But like at the same time, I feel like it would have been more interesting to like maybe not go the like cliched asshole boyfriend route.
Right.
I mean, like he still like made a mistake, but I think like the fact that he apologized, I feel like that feels like so, I guess like contemporary and modern in a way that we don't really see in slasher movies in terms of like using, a lot of tropes. I feel like that would have been an interesting kind of turn on the typical convention.
Well, especially because they're at this fucking Halloween dance in a gender-flipped Bonnie and Clyde costume. So I'm going into the scene thinking, oh, he's progressive. He's a good boyfriend. Like, he's not afraid to show a feminine side or something like that. And then instead he just becomes this really typical teen douchebag.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Though cutting this scene completely changes this character because, as you said, Richard, in this cut we end the movie being, oh wow, that guy was an asshole. He just disappeared from the movie. Why didn't he die?
Yes, I saw so many women being like, that shitty boyfriend needed to go. I don't know why we had to kill Vicky and Ben.
And with this scene, it's like, oh wow, he's actually not a bad guy. He is apologizing and taking responsibility for his actions, and he's just arrested. That's why he's out of the movie. Like, completely changes the film. And honestly, now watching Halloween Kills, when I'm pretty sure they're going to kill him off because of how much hate this character gets.
For sure.
Like, it's kind of like, oh.
You miscalculated again.
It just seems like something you should have left in.
Yep. Yeah, I don't get any pleasure out of actively hating characters and rooting for them to die unless that is their sole purpose. And it doesn't seem like that was what this character was meant to be. And now it's going to be what we get.
Yeah, I would much rather them, give us flawed but human characters and make us feel something when they die instead of just like actively rooting for a person to die.
Wait, Richard, are you asking for like 3-dimensional characters that we care about? Sir.
Well, and to go back to that earlier deleted scene with the kids again, like there's a scene where he's talking to the schlubby friend Oscar, and Oscar's like kind of making a rude, lewd comment about Allison, and he goes, "Hey, don't fuck this up for me. I really like this girl."
Yeah.
Like.
It feels like the character has two different sides, like a Jekyll and Hyde, and we see the Hyde come out at the dance, but it doesn't make any sense to us.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, granted, had I not seen that, would I be like, whatever, this character sucks, he'll die in the sequel? Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
but now that I know that this scene exists and they willingly cut it out, I'm just kind of like, all right, well, there's that.
It was a choice.
Now that I know, I need like a Topher Grace cut of this.
Oh, boy. Okay, so let's talk about Allison's relationship to her mother and her grandma, because this is around the time when they're at school, and Allison obviously sees grandma recreating scenes from the original, only instead of Michael Myers looking, it's grandma.
Do y'all like these recreation? I mean, I think the biggest ones are, yes, this school scene and, Laurie falling over the balcony and, oop, body's gone. Like, those are the most obvious visual homages to the original film. But do y'all like them?
Yeah, I like them.
I like them. I think it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it, but Richard, you cued me when you were talking about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and where it would have gone in the third one where Laurie almost becomes Michael. And it seems like that's a little bit what this film is trying to do, right? Like, she's so infatuated with him that she has actually begun to adopt his mannerisms. Like, she is, in a way, almost stalking her granddaughter.
Yeah.
Like, not in a negative, malicious way, but it's like, okay, your obsessiveness has now started to dominate the way that you even behave around people you like. Also, therapy for everyone in this film.
I do love these exchanges, though. Like, the scene when she gives the money and she's like, fuck college, I go to Mexico. Like, again, like, I love this dynamic between the two. I love Allison calling her out and being like, can you just get over it? Like, this is actually what I really, really liked in this movie.
And tell me, Trace, would you have liked a little bit more of it?
I would like a little bit more of it.
Would you have liked it? Yeah. Yeah, because this scene and then the dinner scene, like, we've had it established that Karen does not get along well with her mother. She has lied to Allison about inviting her to this graduation dinner or whatever the celebration is. I don't even know what they're celebrating. It's like
she's on the Honor Society.
Okay, I'm like, she's got a fucking sash. What is this?
Well, and this is like, again, like, so we get that scene and we get like the scene Richard said earlier, alluded to earlier, where she's waiting outside the prison holding the gun and screaming. Like, these are good moments.
Yes. They give Jamie Lee Curtis something to do. They give Judy Greer something to react to. They tell us things about Allison and how she is forced into a mediator position between these two women. And I fucking want more. Yeah. I just want more. Like, this dinner scene is
it's so
brief.
Good.
It's so good, but it's so brief. Like, Laurie shows up. She just slams back a glass of wine, which, again, it H2O'd me.
H2O.
And then she sits down at the head of the table and just starts going off. And it is so fascinating to watch how everyone reacts to her. And then she just leaves. And it's like, that was maybe 60 seconds. Why are we leaving this combusted family relationship when we could really get into this a little bit more? Yep. Oh, because no one's being murdered or talking about sandwiches.
Well, because I think this is when we're about to... because we're going to the bus crash after this. We're going to the bus... Oh, my God. Bus crash after this. We're going to the bus crash after this.
Where are we going?
The bus crash after this.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So bus crashes, a bunch of people die. We've got the father-son thing. Sure. They kill a child. Yes.
Nice nod to Annie's death in the first movie.
Mm-hmm. I do like the fact that he shoots Dr. Sartain in the shoulder because he is a child handling a gun in the dark.
Do they explicitly say that Sartain is the one that helped, like, that let Michael go and crash the bus and whatever?
It's inferred. I don't think it's... I mean, I think you could read it as Michael is supernatural and very strong, and he crashed it because he saw that they were on the move. Or you could assume that it's, why was Dr. Sartain getting on the bus? He didn't need to oversee this transport.
No.
But I don't think they make it clear. Like, you can read it either way.
Right. Podcasters die next.
Yeah. We're also introduced to Deputy Hawkins, who, as we mentioned, is played by Will Patton. And we get a little bit more where the podcasters are talking about, okay, this is what you need to know from 1978 and the babysitter murders. And then, yes, they go to the gas station and we get the recreation of all of that. And I think this is where people are like, oh, the movie's kicking into high gear now.
And I like, Michael dropping the teeth over the thing. It doesn't. I was kind of like, that seems kind of weird that he would do that. But you know what? Whatever. It's a cool visual.
Sure.
unfortunately, and this is me, this is not the movie's fault really, but it just reminds me of that bathroom scene from H2O.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I think in certain regards, this film is implicitly acknowledging all of those other films. Like it said, we're not doing 2 through whatever, but it clearly touches on all of them except Season of the Witch, which of course we don't ever acknowledge.
Although it does have the masks.
Yeah.
Oh, it does have the masks, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in a way, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, oh, we like this scene from H2O, we're going to put it in here.
Well, and to me, it's like, oh, fans were really upset that mother didn't die in H2O because, like, he just takes her purse and drives the car away instead of killing her and her daughter.
Right.
So it feels like a reaction to that, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get the iconic slow-mo shot as he goes into their trunk and gets the mask.
I'm telling you right now, though, if I am British Ellie Kemper and I'm in this stall and one of y'all walks in to save me and then Michael starts attacking you,
you're out the door already.
I am getting my ass out of there. She just stays in the stall.
So what you're saying is you're going to Brenda this from Scary Movie 2. It's like, mutilate his white ass. I love you, baby girl. See you later.
I'm your best friend. Was.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Okay. So we get a little bit that establishes that Laurie actually knows Hawkins. I can't remember where, but we learned that he was one of the people on the scene back in 1978.
The first deputy.
I don't think his age works with that. Like, she looks so much older than him in this film. I'm like, he looks like a child. What?
I think he's probably as old as her.
I don't know.
Will Patton is 67, and Jamie Lee Curtis is 62. So he's actually 5 years older than her.
Okay. I mean, it's her fake-ass fucking wig or whatever they're doing to her hair in this movie.
This is a wig, right? Is that what this is?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Which I didn't realize when I first saw it. I thought that they had just done some weird, like, bird's nest kind of thing. But yeah, apparently she's always had that, like, short, ever since she cut her hair short, she's always
she's never gone back. Okay.
Yeah, whenever it's long, it's a wig.
Well, because Richard, like that in Halloween 2, that was the big thing, right? The original Halloween 2, where it's she cut her hair, so they put this horrible wig on her to make it look like, the first Halloween. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's the same wig from Halloween 2?
No. It's an old lady wig.
No, she just spray painted it, got gray.
She's got like the Christmas white spray that you can put on trees. She's like, yes. Just a little frosting.
Yes, it looks so bad.
I love that idea. I love the idea of Jamie Lee Curtis doing it herself too. Like, makeup people be damned. No, I'm just going to tease this wig myself and plop it on.
She's got it in her prop room, like the Annabelle room, and it's in a glass case, and it says, like, don't open under any circumstances. But then, like, she did.
Don't open until the production of a new Halloween is being shot. Every 20 years, the glass opens and the wig comes out. What are we talking about?
But see, in H2O, they saw it and they were like, oh god, no, you can have short hair, it's fine.
God, I think she looks so good with short hair. Like, I actually think this wig is not too bad. Like, I think, as you said, Richard, it's convincing enough that unless you're a wig enthusiast, you're probably fine with it. But I love Jamie Lee Curtis with the short hair.
Yeah.
I don't know. I also love Ripley with the short hair. Maybe I'm just like, give me a butch woman. I love it. Okay, yeah, so blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's get to this Halloween night, because I do think that one of the reasons that people really liked the back half of this film is starting at this particular scene, and the way particularly that David Gordon Green shoots this, where Michael is just so confident and in control. He is just walking in and out of people's houses, casually murdering them, switching up weapons, and the camera work here I think is among the best in the film.
Yeah, I love the tracking shot through the houses. I don't know if you guys remember when this came out. Well, like, I don't remember who it was, but someone was like legitimately angry that he didn't kill the baby.
Yes,
like,
I do remember
legitimately
that.
Upset.
100%. Like, he pauses and looks at it and doesn't murder it. Like, okay, I like a child death, but
Richard,
don't need a baby.
So listen, I know you probably don't peruse the bloody disgusting comment boards very often,
oh, God.
but Yes, that complaint. I don't know. Honestly, go look at Joe's review. Maybe they comment on it there because yes, sure. People were very much like that. Not my Michael Myers. He would kill that baby. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like,
yeah, it's like I don't really need to see that. Like,
yeah, but even if it's like, oh, you want to imply it, like he did it, but we don't see it, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna be that nitpicky where I'm like, oh my god, well, Michael Myers would do this and he wouldn't do this and he would. It's a baby, whatever. Like, he didn't kill it. Move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much good in this particular scene that I don't need to see a baby getting murdered. I've already seen like 2 women and a man get murdered. Like, it's all fine.
And there's something to, I mean, this is the 45-minute mark of the film, but there is something about Egg, because, you know, the kids wearing the Halloween 3 mask bump into him, and we get that chainsaw-ish music cue that's in the first film, and then that's when the theme kicks in.
Yeah.
And I don't know about y'all, but when this happened, and actually every time I've watched this movie, I get chills.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good.
Thought you were gonna say like your dick kind of like springs to life a little bit or something.
I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I get hard.
That Carpenter score gets me so hard.
No, but it's good. And yes, you're right. The tracking shot is fantastic. And there's something, because we're doing a thing where it's like, oh, he's not related to Laurie anymore, so he's just killing people.
He's just out and about, yeah.
This is probably the scariest sequence in the film, which is just, he's walking around just massacring people in this town, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like I've never seen this kind of scene before in a slasher either. Like, I'm used to people getting chased by Jason and slamming doors and him just barreling through a window or something like that. This is just like, I'm just going to try this door. I'm just going to walk through this open space. Like, he's just out for a stroll, and the stroll just happens to have a body count. Like, that is terrifying, because if you're picturing yourself as a resident of this town, nothing will save you unless you had that door locked.
And that's where it ties into the themes of the first film, right, in suburbia. And we'll get it again later when Allison runs to a house and, oh, someone actually lets her in.
Which is a nice change, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we've got the Halloween dance, all of that nonsense. So let's talk about Vicky and Julian, who apparently some people hate and some people love, but he is played by Jabril Nantambu.
I love him. I love this kid. I think he's so sweet, and I enjoy the humor he employs in this film.
Yeah, I really like him. I think he's a cute kid. He's funny. I would like watch like a Home Alone style slasher.
Oh my god, yes. Just a Julian spin-off where he's like, I've got a new babysitter. Oh shit, people are trying to break into this house.
And there's also something just genuinely refreshing about how Vicky like talks to him as if he's like of the same level as her is, you know, like maturity wise or adult wise or whatever. Like, she doesn't talk to him like he's a little kid. And it's fun to watch them banter. And, you know, it's coming, I know, right after we've just seen this awesome, you know, Michael Myers street massacre, but it's kind of a welcome reprieve from that. And yeah, I enjoy it.
I agree. And I think this is their sort of contemporary version of the way that Jamie Lee Curtis talks to Tommy. And, you know, Laurie is a little bit more, okay, go to bed. It's not safe for you. But this feels like, oh, we're acknowledging 40 years have passed, and the way that we talk to kids is a little bit different. Like, she recognizes that this kid is smart enough that she can speak truth to him.
That actually is interesting, though. I didn't even think about that, like how it's kind of like mimicking the original. But I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I'm surprised that it's not Allison the one who's the babysitter and Vicky's the one at the dance.
A little bit, yeah. I can't help but wonder if this is, again, like a modern version. We're not trying to do a desexualized final girl. Like, our final girl actively has a boyfriend that she's going to the dance and maybe is going to fuck later.
Yeah.
Except that Cameron sucks.
Unless you have that deleted scene.
Right. Yes, correct. Yeah. Okay, so we get different scenes of Laurie and Hawkins driving around because they're waiting for something to happen. Calls are starting to come in. And this is when we then see Dave and Vicky get dispatched in the house.
I like this sequence. I mean, I hate saying I wish we get to see them get killed, because I know we see the bodies later. And I actually love the tableau of Dave's body with the knife through his neck and whatever. But yeah, there's something I wish we could have seen it.
I was fine not seeing Vicky's because seeing her get dragged back is enough for me. And then Under the Sheet, which is, very visually evocative, very reminiscent of the original. I could have seen Michael stab Dave because we're already doing the homage by having him literally pinned up in the middle of the wall like that. But also it reminds me of what Richard said earlier. I just wish we could have gotten more Miles Robbins because he's barely a character. I feel like the only reason I like him is because I like Miles Robbins.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's not necessarily that I want to see the death, but more so that I just wish that we got more of him before the deaths.
Yeah, it feels like the teenagers are in here because we're doing a remake of the original / sequel, but also we don't want to do very much with the teenagers because we also have adult Laurie and to a lesser extent adult Karen. I feel like there's a tension between the adult storylines and the teenager storylines in this, and I'll be interested to see how much that does or doesn't continue, because I feel like we've killed off most of the teenagers and we're now going to move almost exclusively into adult territory.
Yeah, I think in some ways, that's an interesting subversion of what we expect from the slasher movie.
Right.
But, the teenage characters that they do have are just, I find them so much more interesting than a lot of the adult characters that get introduced. And so I think that's the real issue, is that if you want to, shift it over into adults, then I feel like we need more interesting supporting adults, which I'm hoping that we get in Kills.
But weirdly, it's going to be more fan service, right? We're deliberately bringing back Tommy. We're deliberately bringing back whatever character that Real Housewife
Lindsay
is
Wallace.
Going to play. Sure. I find that character boring and I don't care about a Real Housewife, but sure.
Lindsay Wallace? Oh, Lindsay Wallace is so funny. Little Lindsay Wallace.
I'm worried that we're going to have to spend a bunch of time being like, where have you been for the last 40 years? Oh, you know who this character is because you recognize them from the original. And I'm like, wait, so why did you bother introducing all these characters in the first film just so you could kill them off? And now we're going to spend more time introducing new old characters.
You know what? You can just go watch the first movie again and then immediately go watch Halloween Kills.
I guess so. Yeah. Please give me a watch list order that I should be watching these in now. I mean, I guess everybody would say, duh, the original and then this one. But yeah. Okay. So they're dead, and we've got this crime scene now. So Laurie arrives, and she has a little bit of a fight with Dr. Sartain, who has now come back for some reason. He's been fixed up, and now he's out and about. Sure, whatever.
Well, I mean, because he's looking for Michael at this point. I guess we do know that. We just don't know why he's looking for Michael. Yeah.
And of course, now that we know that Michael is hunting people, this is when Karen and Laurie desperately start trying to get Allison. She has left with Oscar, and this is when Oscar is killed in the motion sensor sequence.
I don't know, but hey, maybe this is because we just covered it, Joe, but Richard, I was getting real It Follows-y from this, because I was like, dude, this backyard is enormous. Run laps around him. Just run in a circle.
Yeah, I definitely got similar It Follows vibes as well. But yeah, I really like this scene, especially when the music kicks in afterwards. It's probably my favorite Carpenter musical moment in the movie is right after this.
100. Yes, as soon as she walks up and sees Oscar with that fence through his chin.
Yeah.
And I think it's called The Shape Stalks Allison. Maybe that's the track called what it's called, but
very direct.
No, because it is barely over a minute long, and I can tell you right now, I did a whole commute to work one day, 30 minutes, listening to this track on repeat.
Oh wow. Okay. I like this visually. As a character moment, I don't think it tells it's not very interesting in terms of Oscar. He's a bit of an idiot if he doesn't understand, hey, this strange man in a mask is clearly stalking me. It reminds me a little too much of the 80s stupid teenagers where they just go, hey man, what's up?
Actually, Oh, you know what though, Joe? I'm going back to your point earlier about why they cut out the Cameron scene, because I know have we mentioned Me Too yet in this episode?
We have not, no.
Okay. That was a big part of not the marketing for this movie, but in the publicity for this movie, because it's always something that Jamie Lee Curtis brought up constantly. So I even wonder if Oscar, like, making a pass at her, like, I wonder even if that was, like, maybe a reshoot or something, but that would also attest to why Cameron's thing was cut to we're going with the Me Too thing.
Yeah, maybe. I will say, not to throw more shade at Jamie Lee Curtis, but especially now that we're a couple of years removed from it, it smacks a little too much of opportunism. Like, I can definitely see people talking about, yeah, this is Laurie Strode, 40 years of trauma and PTSD. Absolutely. Happy to read a bunch of think pieces about that. As I mentioned, there's a bunch of good ones out there. But Jamie Lee Curtis being like, oh yeah, this is a film with the Me Too movement. I'm like, no, that is about sexual harassment and assault and people like misusing their privilege and silencing women. That is not in this movie. You can say female agency. You can say female, like tapping into their rage and like fighting back, but there's no elements of sexual harassment and assault, unless you want to say that Michael Myers is representative of that and the way that it never stops leaving you. Oscar makes a pass at her and she leaves. Like, that's, I mean, sure, some people are going to say that's harassment, but for me, I'm like, I think women just deal with that fucking all the time.
Yeah.
Also, I'm so sorry, Richard. I feel like we were shitting on this movie for you.
No, I mean, I still love the movie.
Richard's like, I'm just drowning out everything that you're saying.
No, it's fine. I've done this to Joe, and Joe has done this to me.
No, but I like understand, like, and I can look at all the flaws in this movie and still, I feel like that's part of loving horror. I mean, there are so many movies that, you know, get slammed by critics all the time that I still love. So yeah, I mean, I don't think anything like you guys are saying is wrong. I still love the movie.
There we go. That's very fair. Yeah. Okay, so at this point, we're now zeroing in mostly on the Strode/Nelson family. So Karen and Laurie have been escorted with police presence along with Toby Huss's character. They've gone back to Laurie's padded estate, I guess. And Allison is now on the run because, of course, Oscar is dead. So she knows she's in trouble. Yeah, she runs down the street. Somebody actually lets her in. So she gets sort of rescued there. And this is when Deputy Hawkins shows up along with Dr. Sartain.
Do we have anything more to say about Sartain? Because we kind of have gone over this already. But is there anything else you want to say about him?
I don't, but Trace, did you want to say something about Suburbia?
No, I mean, you know, part of what I love about that original film, though, is that it's kind of a critique on Suburbia, how it's supposed to be this really safe place. And obviously, everyone knows this if you've done any research on Halloween, so I'm not saying anything new or revelatory here, but you know, you have that scene where Laurie is going, like, knocking on houses, and someone turns the light on, and they don't let her in. They turn the light off and say, "Go away, crazy girl." And so what I like about this scene, not only that it's an inversion, because yes, that's exactly what it's doing, but it's also playing on your expectations. So where we have something like, you know, the Laurie going over the balcony and, like, you know, not being there, oh, it's just like the original. This is more in line with that subversion earlier we're talking about in the classroom, where it's Laurie spying on her granddaughter instead of Michael. Like, it's playing off of, oh, I think I know what's going to happen here, and it doesn't do it. And so this works for me in the sense that it's like, also the irony, by the way, right? Like, in 2018, neighbors are friendlier than they were in 1978.
Yeah, that for me was the only part that I wouldn't like about it, was this idea, oh, we haven't actually gotten to be better neighbors with each other. So it almost rang a little false to me, but I do agree with you. I like it, a homage that also subverts our expectations.
Yeah.
But still, we could have just had him chase her to grandma's house at this point, but we don't get that. We have to get
all the Sartain
stuff. Yeah,
which we've already talked about. We'll skip over, and then we get the Bánh Mi conversation, which I am going to defend this conversation. I like this.
Okay,
I can see how it's in the climax of almost at the climax of the film. So people are like, you're grinding the suspense to a halt.
Yes.
I don't care. I enjoy it. Joe, you're going to laugh. There is an extended version of this scene on the Blu-ray.
Jesus. No.
know, people always show, fucking David Gordon Green and Danny McBride doing the goddamn Bánh Mi. They're so stupid. I don't care. I like it. It's fine.
I do not like it. I will agree with the people who say that it grinds. I don't think it grinds the film to a halt because it's actually not that long. You have to say it like I said it. It just grinds it to a halt?
That's what you sound like.
Shut up. For me, yeah, it does play with a bit of wonky pacing. The thing I don't like about it, and folks will hear me say this again when we cover Scream 4 in January, is just... I think it feels a little bit out of place. Like, it feels like a scene that doesn't need to be in there. I feel like they kept it because they thought it was a good comedy, but not because it actually works in this moment in the film. I actually would have liked this if it was earlier when maybe we were seeing these two, like, waiting to pick up Karen and Laurie. Like, oh, man, I wish we could stop for Bánh Mi. I'm really hungry, but instead we've got to protect this family or something like that. Or maybe it would never work. Who knows?
No, I could see that. Like, yeah, earlier when we're not in the middle of Allison being chased by a killer.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, in a cop car with a killer.
Yeah. I also think it sets up the reveal when Toby Huss's character actually does come out. And then, of course, we get the homage reveal back to the head with the lamp up it.
But Richard, you have to be the tiebreaker. Yay or nay to Bánh Mi?
Oh, he's totally going to say he likes it.
Yeah, I like the Bánh Mi.
Because you said the comedy worked for you, so I knew that this was going to be one of those instances.
Yeah, hey, you know what? He could have been like, oh yeah, this is the one thing I don't like. It's fine.
It's true. Yeah, so Allison is now running through the woods. We do have Michael arriving at Grandma's place because Allison clearly gets lost among Grandma's like mannequin factory garden thing.
Wait, Allison is running through these woods and gets to the house about, 20 minutes after Michael via walking through the woods.
Yeah. Well, I'm partially convinced that Michael has actually lifted a page from Jason Voorhees and that he is like bamfing through the woods. Like he's like, okay, my business here at the car is done. Bamf. All right, I'm at the Strode residence. I'm ready to fight.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where we do get some good stuff between Laurie and Karen, where Laurie actually apologizes, but also it's a bit weird because this moment has confirmed that Laurie was right to do all this shit.
But she does apologize to her, though. She says, I'm sorry I raised you the way I did.
Yeah, I just think it's a bit weird. Like, it's a tender moment that I appreciated between the two of them, but also... why are you apologizing? Because clearly you did the right thing because now you're being hunted by a serial killer.
But that's where layers can come in because I think there's more to it because she's saying, oh, I'm sorry that I did this to you. I'm sorry that it created like this life that you have now, like that you had to get out of, that you were taken away from me as a kid. Like she could have taught her daughter all this stuff without becoming an unfit mother and having her daughter taken away from her by Child Protective Services, Right. But again, like that's a conversation that should go on, but we don't have time to do that right now because Michael Myers is here.
Indeed, yeah. So Karen is ushered into the basement for what we think is her own protection, and then Laurie gets attacked through the door. I like all this. This is, starting to build up the tension between the two of them because this is really the first time we've seen them interact in the entire film.
I think this climax is really fun. I really do enjoy this climax a lot.
Yeah, it's cool to see them like actually confront each other after all this time. I feel like it builds up for so long that I do feel like the payoff in this is worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think again of H2O because we did get a relatively sustained climax between the two of them. But in this case, it's very different from H2O's, right? Like that one was more, I'm going to try to distract him and then maybe fight him a little bit. This one is, I am in control. I have booby-trapped this entire fucking house to the nth degree.
But see, here's where my difference is going to come in and why people don't... I mean, our editor, Brad Miska, hates the fact that she, is overtaken so easily in this climax. What we have in H2O is, confident, powerful, she's she's not necessarily confident, but she's getting shit done.
Okay.
Whereas this one is the exact opposite, where she is confident, but overly so. and she messes
Right.
up. And I think that people, when they watch this climax, they're like, oh, like, H2O's is better because, yes, that is a more crowd-pleasing, audience-friendly climax for this story. This is not. And while I do prefer to watch the climax of H2O because I just think, again, yeah, it really gets you going. You're like, fuck yeah, bitch! Like, insert Lucille Bluth, good for her gif. This feels more real to me. Like, this feels more like what would actually happen. And again, I mean, I'm just, guessing here, but
Right.
it feels appropriately and necessarily messy in a way that H2O is not.
Yeah, I think that's part of what really gets me about this climax is that, it feels like this is someone, who exists in a real world. I like the fact that Laurie isn't this kind of superhero.
She's not infallible.
Right, and we set her up, the film sets her up to kind of be the Sarah Connor character.
Yes.
But like in the end, like she's not. Like she's overpowered by this monster and then has to rely on her family to reconnect, become part of the community again, which I think is kind of a really interesting, kind of subversion of what we expect, but then also like of the original movie where, it's Laurie pretty much by herself. And I think that's something that, hopefully, and it seems like from the previews for Halloween Kills, is that she has to become more reliant on, Haddonfield as a community rather than just herself.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Good point. Yeah. It feels, and maybe y'all can say I'm wrong with this, but it feels like a less Hollywoodized ending than H2O does. Like, H2O is like sleeping with the enemy, I like to report a murder. Bam! Husband's dead. Whereas this is just not that. It's an unconventional, I mean, granted, it still ends the same. They trap him, they win, whatever. But like, at least for this little bit of where it's just the one-on-one, like, and actually, Richard, similarly in this, she has to rely on her daughter to take him down. She can't do it by herself.
Well, I like what you're both saying because it's kind of addressing what Brad Miska's issue was, right? Like, this isn't actually Laurie being unable to defend herself and being ill-prepared or overconfident. Her whole plan is to come off this way, and utilizing her daughter having prepared her this way. Like, this is her play acting at not being good at defending herself so that she can lure Michael into that basement. But similarly, you can't just read it as, yeah, she thought she had him. It didn't work out. They went to plan B and she realized, I can't do this by myself. I need to involve other people. No one person will ever be able to take Michael Myers down. I need to actually use my daughter. I need to use my bonds to the community and my family that I have tried to push away all these years. The only way we will all survive this is if I reach out and use that.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what she does after, we get, like, honestly, this movie's mannequin budget must have been off the chains because we have got so many Maniac-style mannequins. But yeah, they eventually get Michael into the basement. The moment where he falls down the stairs and then grabs Judy Greer's leg, it's coming, and I actually still find it very effective.
It is effective, but hold on, because we did gloss over Judy Greer's gotcha, which I do think is fantastic. But, and y'all may disagree, I think it is immediately deflated by this Jamie Lee Curtis, like, we're doing the light thing from the original movie, Happy Halloween, Michael. I think it looks bad, but the funny thing is, seeing this in theaters, people were cheering and hollering and hooting.
Oh, sure.
When Judy Greer did the gotcha.
Yeah.
And to the point where when Jamie Lee Curtis has her moment where it's like, Happy Halloween, Michael, and she's going to do whatever, push him in there.
It doesn't have the same punch, right?
Well, you also can't hear it. You could not hear it. Because people were so going gangbusters for Judy Greer. So I'm like, oh, the Judy Greer moment works amazingly.
But then it overshadows Laurie's.
It overshadows Laurie's because Laurie's is not as effective. But also, if you're, again, playing to an audience, like, yeah, no one's going to hear what Jamie Lee Curtis... when I first saw this in theaters, I don't even know what Jamie Lee Curtis did.
I was so high on my Judy Greer fan club. Fucking Judy Greer gets the killer punchline.
Such a good moment for Judy Greer, and I hate that they kind of take it away from her by having Laurie do this thing with this really weird fucking light trick.
I really like the visuals of her doing, as you said, Trace, a light trick where she opens up all of these gas faucets around the entire fucking house. Like, normally we'd get an action movie cliche where it's like, oh, there's one propane tank that's open and I flick a match in slow motion and Michael goes up. And instead, he's just standing there with his black, dead eyes, not giving a shit that he's about to get exploded. But we get all of these isolated shots of like the gas going up in different rooms. I like it.
Yeah, it's cool.
So they explode him. Oh, by the way, Allison has joined this club. She's been here for a little bit. We forgot about her.
She's there. She is present in these scenes.
I will say when she enters and says grandmother, which is just...
She calls her grandmother all throughout the movie, and it feels so antiquated.
Which I feel like that's also like a Danny McBride touch.
Interesting.
But yeah, when she entered the house and did that in the theater, like so many people like busted out laughing because it's just such an odd choice. I think about it like so often. It's just like
I'm just out getting my coffee. I'm on the metro, and I think grandmother.
Yeah, it's just that moment just like really like has stuck with me for some reason because it's just so odd.
Because no. Does Gen Z listeners, do y'all say grandmother? Let us know.
Do you also eat Werther's Originals? Just
I eat the chews 100%. They are so good.
Okay, so Michael exploded. We've got all three of our Strode/Nelson women have survived. They Texas Chainsaw Massacre it by hitching a ride in the back of a truck. Yay, we're all happy. It's a little bit sad. Thankfully, we've got this fire. Michael is obviously completely dead. There's no way he's ever going to come back. Oh, wait, is that him breathing over the credits? We're done.
Did y'all have any suspicions? Because the last shot of this film is a zoom in on the knife that Allison is holding. Did y'all think that maybe the direction of the sequel they were going to do was...
She was going to go Jamie?
Kind of, yeah, like follow up on the cliffhanger from Halloween 4 and actually follow through with it and make, like... I honestly was like, I knew they wouldn't get rid of Michael Myers, but I was like, wouldn't that be wild and brave and bold? If Michael was actually dead and it was Allison who snaps and goes on a rampage in the sequel.
I 100% thought that when I first saw it before the breathing. 100%.
Audiences would revolt. They would be so pissed.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like at the same time, like that's kind of like what I want to see. Like it's so like daring and risky. Like I legitimately like thought like, oh, is David Gordon Green like legit gonna kill Michael Myers and just like go completely different direction with this?
Mm-hmm.
It's called Halloween Ends. It's coming to you in 2022.
I mean, look, I'm just sitting here like, oh my god, what kind of a cliffhanger is Halloween Kills gonna end on? Because you know it's gonna end on a cliffhanger. You know it's gonna be some really big life or death thing. And oops, see you next year. So,
oh, for sure. Yeah, I think I think there's a very real risk that we will lose either Jamie Lee Curtis, unlikely, or Judy Greer. Or they will be in mortal danger going into the final film.
Yeah. But, that is Halloween, y'all. Final thoughts? And Richard, as the guest of honor, your thoughts on this film?
Yeah, I still really like it. I 100%, agree with a lot of the flaws and the issues that this movie has. But, I love this franchise. I love, like, the excitement for seeing a new Halloween movie. And really, like, there's not an entry that I dislike except for Resurrection.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's fair.
That is very fair.
I will say, I marathoned all these, and I found it a bit of a struggle, but Resurrection's easily the worst.
Yeah.
That one just feels like such a cash grab, right? Like, there's no soul in it, and the way they get rid of Laurie is such a slap in the face of fans.
And the mask is just like...
Oh, the mask is real bad, yeah. Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about the mask at all in this.
No, I don't
know. Yeah, I love the mask in this.
I'm sorry, I was about to be like, I don't care, but no, please, no, like, talk about it.
Yeah, well, I just think that the like weathered like texture to make it like age almost like skin is just like kind of a cool choice. And I also just like kind of like the idea of it getting like more and more fucked up like through the next 2 entries. It seems like he has the burned half, so I'm very curious to see what it'll look like by the end of this. And
Jaws 2.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I didn't even stop to think, yeah, that mask is going to be a little charred going into the next movie.
And his missing fingers.
Right, yeah, because we got those shotgunned off. I like this. I liked it a lot when I first saw it, and then when the high came down, I really ended up just focusing in on a lot of the flaws. Having a couple of years distance and having the opportunity to revisit it for this was helpful because I knew what I was going in with this time. And yeah, I hate all of the Dr. Satan. I hate all of that. I really just do wish that we had a bit more time with these characters. Like, maybe get rid of 1 or 2 of these storylines so that we could just spend more time. Because I do think Danny McBride has done a reasonable job of creating interesting people I'd like to spend more time with. And because we don't get that, I just feel like the film has a kind of start and stop motion. But yeah, like you said, Trace, I'm also intrigued to see if I will feel differently with each successive new entry. Because if this works well as a trilogy, then all of this may be for moot, right? Like, we don't know.
Yeah, so Joe, you gave this a 4 out of 5 in your original review. Where would you settle on it now?
So now it's a 3.
Okay. I was a 4 when I saw it. I'm a 3.5 now, so I'm slightly higher than you. Because I'm more on the Richard side, where I'm like, I am aware of all these flaws, and I have a lot of gripes with this film, as you have all noticed over the past 2 hours. But I still like it. Again, my preferred timeline, like, as of now, is 1-2 H2O. But 2018 is probably a second pick for me. I know people were like 3, and I like it, but I don't ever really revisit it that much. And the Cult of Thorns stuff is fine, but meh.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. So yeah, I like it. I do like this movie quite a bit. I am very, very aware of its flaws because it is not flawless.
Right.
Well, all right, everyone. Before we announce what we're covering next week, Richard, please, thank you for coming on to this episode to talk about this with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a blast.
And please let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, I am on Twitter at Richard L. Newby.
And if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Queers, and join our Facebook Horror Queers group to hang out with other listeners. You can find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered, and also we've got a YouTube channel where you can go watch us record our Micro Queers videos. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcatcher of choice. And if you want even more Horror Queers content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. Go subscribe now, because we are, in the middle of spooky season. We'll be having, we have episodes on Slasher Flesh and Blood, Netflix's Midnight Mass, and of course we'll have some on Paranormal Activity, and as Joe already said, Halloween Kills next week. And to help celebrate the release of the new Chucky series, our audio commentary this month will be on Child's Play 2.
And actually, we should note that by this point, Microqueers will have been on pause because we're actually going to be covering Chucky on a weekly basis.
Yay! It's a first for us, y'all, but please go listen to those, because we'll be talking about the eps as they come out. But Joe?
Yes.
What are we talking about next week?
All right, so as you said, it's October, spooky season. I thought that we should revisit a property, or rather a franchise, that we've looked at before, but it feels apropos because you talked about how much you were happy to move away from vampires. Yeah, we're going to go back and revisit the original Marvel vampire movie. So we're going to be looking at Blade.
I can't believe on this fucking podcast, we have done Blade Trinity, and we're going to do Blade. So we're doing the best one last, apparently, is what we're saying.
I love this first one. I did not have fond memories of Trinity, but original Blade is a very important to me.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I love that Del Toro touch. But all right, everyone. Well, until next week, we can cross out Halloween.
Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.